Hello and welcome to the third ARRI Asia Hour. So today's topic was prompted by several requests we received about maintenance on ARRI equipment. So today we are streaming from our service department in Hong Kong. My name is Sylvan Liu and I am the head of the department. So I'll briefly cover some basic topics on several of our different products, including cameras and lighting and lenses. Once we get done with the basics, I will talk a little bit more in detail about what we can do on lenses and how we can service them. Afterwards, we'll still have plenty of time for a Q&A, but nevertheless, I'll try to get to any questions that I notice even while I'm talking. So ask at any time. Okay, but before we get started, my colleagues have prepared two polls for you to answer. The first of which is, which ARRI products have you personally done maintenance for? And have you engaged ARRI service and were you satisfied? Okay, so while you're answering that, I will get started with this HMI fixture. So this happens to be an M8. However, the main points apply to any tungsten or HMI fixture. So maybe just in general, housing cleaning, any general purpose cleaner on a soft cloth is safe to use, and you should clean the outside housing just to make sure you don't have a lot of residue on it, which when turned on could burn in. Two things to pay special attention to. One is the lens, that is the protective UV glass in front of the bulb. That should be cleaned using standard glass cleaner. That glass cleaner can also be used to clean the reflector inside. So both of these should be cleaned to make sure you get the maximum light output. As we've done measurements, if either one of these is very dusty, for example, the light output will suffer greatly. Another thing that is important on the reflector, why it should be clean, you really want to make sure it's quite shiny and it can reflect as much light as possible. Another reason, outside of the light output, is that the less light it reflects, the more heat it will absorb. So if it's absorbing a lot of heat, that means in extreme situations, we could actually have the reflector melt. And we, of course, want to avoid that. Kind of in general, when storing or transporting these fixtures, make sure the lamp holder is in the open position. That means that there is no tension on the lamp holder itself. Because if we have constant tension on that, it can weaken the springs, and that would result in less contact between the holder and the bulb, which again can cause more heat. Other than that, please store the bulb outside. Obviously, when the lamp holder is open, you don't want to have the bulb inside. The bulb also should be clean. Avoid touching the bulb as much as possible. Any kind of grease you have on your fingers could result in, if you leave it on the bulb when it's on, could result in hot spots, which I'm told can cause quite spectacular explosions. So if you do touch it or there's dirt on it, make sure to clean it, ideally with 99% isopropyl alcohol, because that evaporates quite cleanly. So that's this topic. Then we will come to LED lights. Actually, with LED, there is less to pay attention to. Again, generally cleaning the outside is okay. Don't use so much liquids that it could run inside. That may cause damage. So I get a question that says, would love to know how to store your lenses so they don't get dusty. Where do you store them and how? Well, that is a good question, but I'm afraid I don't have an answer for you. So because it really depends on where you're storing your lights. So I would not suggest removing the lenses from the fixtures just for storage reasons. If you can store the fixtures in a clean environment, obviously that would be less dusty, but I'm afraid you'll just need to clean the lenses quite regularly. Okay, so when we're coming to the LEDs, then again, nothing too spectacularly important. Clean the screen, clean the knobs, like especially the places that people might touch, like the lock. One thing to be careful about when cleaning the LEDs, like the sky panel, is please don't use cloth to just wipe across the inside of the fixture. This may cause you to rip off some of the LED chips, and that can result in quite the expensive repair, which means we need to replace the light engine. So be careful when you're cleaning inside of there. But other than that, it's quite low maintenance, and that's pretty much all I have for this. All right, so then we would come to cameras. So again, housing of the camera, similar to the lights. There's nothing too spectacular. Use a clean cloth, general purpose cleaning supplies. If you want to get the knobs and buttons, Q-tips can be helpful. Don't forget to get the door and the inside of the door. A lot of people will be touching the inside to add and remove the media. Clean the media, please. Then we have the viewfinder, quite similar. Special attention maybe on the eye cup. People put their eye there, so I think everybody will be happier if it's clean. The lens of the viewfinder, or the eyepiece of the viewfinder, use a lens tissue, use some isopropyl alcohol, and wipe in a circular motion from the center to the edges. Then one other thing, again, the lens mount we see quite frequently is not very clean. So maybe that's a good place for special attention. Then when we open the lens mount and look at the sensor itself, it might be obvious that we want to be quite delicate when we're cleaning that. So the best way to avoid cleaning is, of course, to keep the lens cap on if there is no lens on here. If dust has gotten inside, just a bulb blower, kind of a manual one. Please don't use compressed air. Especially canned compressed air can have propellants inside, and when you use that on the cover glass, it can damage it, leaving residue, and may actually lead to a repair or a required repair. Okay, so what happens if this is not enough? We actually have on our website a PDF document that we've created several years ago already, but you might be interested to look at it again. and I think my colleagues will put a link in there. And it has a lot of information of what type of materials to use. We here are using this kind of swab. These come packaged in a sealed bag. We only remove them when we want to actually use them. So this one has been out, so I would not be using this on the lens or on the cover glass right now. But the PDF document that they linked will have a lot of the details and how that is handled. One thing to avoid is acetone, and similar to the electronics on the outside, don't use so much that the cleaning fluids could leak or run into different crevices, and they may cause damage or just be inside the sensor and cause fogging. So, or especially if you're using acetone or something, please don't. That is not a suggested cleaning fluid. That may cause paints or glue to dissolve, and that is not a pretty sight. Some people may like to re-grease the mechanism on the PL mount. So for that, all you have to do is remove this big screw here, and then you can unscrew this entire section and clean and re-grease that. Okay, I think that's all I have for the camera. And then finally, we're coming to lenses. Again, with the lenses, nothing too spectacular. Use a clean cloth, general purpose cleaners to clean the housing. We see quite a lot of lens caps that are not very clean. Please don't forget to clean those. Then when it comes to the actual lens, similar to what we talked about on the viewfinder, use a clean lens tissue, wipe from the center to the edges. The reason you don't want to start from the edges is you could drag out particles that are maybe hiding in the corners there, and that could cause you to scratch up the lens. All right, so that kind of concludes our standard maintenance topics. Then my colleagues have prepared one more poll for you. And this question is, have you participated in any of our service trainings before? Right, so some of you may have, and in that case, you might be familiar with some of the things that I mentioned now. But overall, this, of course, is not a full service training. This is just an overview for maintenance. All of this does not require any kind of special tools or screwdrivers, so this is just general purpose maintenance. Okay, so while you're answering this question, I will move over into our lens projection room, where we will talk more about lenses and what we can do about maintaining or servicing those. So what a lens projector is, let me actually just turn this off for now. So the lens projector is quite a versatile tool that can be used differently by different people. So for example, a DP might use a lens projector to compare different types of lenses and decide which lens works for him for certain situations. Of course, we here in service, we're looking at the lens and the projection of the lens to determine if the lens needs to be repaired or not, or if it's in a condition that we can return it to a customer. Sorry. So one other thing is for many rental houses, they will use the lens projector for adjusting the back focus. So you can see here there's a gauge that we can very precisely identify the back focus of the lens with. Other hardware, kind of the basic setup of a projector is in here there is a strong light source. Then we have a test chart, which is in the position of the film plane or the sensor. In front of that, we have the lens mount and the lens. So what happens when we project the lens, or when we turn on the light inside, we actually have the reverse of what would happen when we have the lens on the camera. So the light path is reversed, but we can see most of the, or the effects are quite similar either way. So then we'll turn on the projector, and some things that we can see here are, so first off, we can see kind of the illumination circle. So how much of the test chart can we see? So this lens, we can see the outside ring is about 31 millimeters. So that is on this chart specifically, but we can see barely outside the ring, the patterns disappear, and that is as much as this lens can cover. So any sensor that would need a bigger image circle, this lens would vignette. Another thing is the light fall off. So if we look at how bright are the patterns in the center compared to the edges, so generally lenses will be slightly dimmer at the edges. Then another thing we can see quite easily is lens distortion. So when we're looking at the grid pattern, are these lines straight? So if they might be bowed out or in, and that's quite easily to see in this setup. One more thing that we can see kind of from the totality of the image is lens breathing. So if I focus this lens, does the image change size? And depending on how much that changes, that is kind of the indication of how much lens breathing we're seeing. Another thing, aside from the breathing, is the out of focus behavior. So again, kind of while you're doing the lens breathing, you can also see what does it look like when the lens is out of focus. Now, if we then look more closely at the test patterns, so we might stand quite close, and usually the effect is probably better if you were here and could look at this quite closely, but I'll try to just explain. Also, I chose a lens that is quite severely decentered, so you might be able to see some of the things that I am talking about. Right, so when we're looking at the fine detail, we're looking at line pairs. So a white line and a black line, and seeing how clear is the difference between them. Is the white much brighter than the black, or how big is the difference, which is the contrast? And then also, how clean is the edge between white and black? Is it a sudden change from white to black, or is it more of a transition? So these two factors together make up how sharp a lens looks. Okay, so when we're looking here, we have these different line frequencies. So we have bigger lines and smaller lines in general. Then we can see maybe, can we see all the most fine lines or not? And that's kind of a tool you can use to compare different lenses to see how much fine detail they can resolve. Now, as I mentioned, this lens is a lens that needs to be serviced. So it's quite severely decentered. So even in the center here, where most lenses you should not see any major issues. They should be quite clear in the center. Even on very old or cheap lenses, the center generally looks quite good. But even here, we can see a little bit, and we might see it a little bit more when we defocus. So what we're seeing, there's a little bit of flare that goes to one side, and it's not quite an even image. So that is kind of one thing that we can look at to determine does the lens need to be serviced or not. In general, if you look at particular lenses quite often, you may know what the lens is supposed to look like or what it usually looks like. So when it comes back from a rental or from a production and you put it on the projector and it looks different, you will know there's something wrong with it. But if you don't know the lens terribly well, or maybe you have a lot of different lenses and can't remember exactly what each lens looks like, this would be one indication of why or how you would determine a lens needs to be serviced. Another one that is quite obvious or can be quite obvious is asymmetry. So symmetry just means if we look at one side of the image, it should look very similar to the other side of the image. So we can look top, bottom, left, right, different corners. Usually we kind of look at the test patterns in a defined distance from the center. And we will, for example, we look at this test pattern on the right. And if we look, it's okay, it's a little bit blurry, we see some color fringing, but then if we look at the pattern on the other side, so if we look at the left side or the corresponding left side, we will see it is much more blurry, and so that will tell us that this lens is not symmetrical. So when we identify a lens that has such problems, what we would do is, of course, or we hope you would send it here to us for repair, and we would bring it over into our service department, and we have a specially set up location here where we do lens adjustments or optical adjustments. So here, this is another device that we have set up to repair lenses that have a problem like we just saw on the projection. Obviously, this is a different lens, but in general, I just want to talk about the concept of what we do here. So we place the lens on this device, and it's actually quite similar, or the basic function is quite similar to what we did on the projector. So we have a light source and we have a test chart in here, and then on top of that we have this lens. And then we're using the telescopes on top to look at the test patterns at different positions of the lens. So we can think of it quite similar to what we were looking at on the projector. So on the screen here, we see the test pattern, which in this case is a simple cross, and we see what the image at the three different positions looks like. So this is a measurement that is very precise. So this machine will use the test patterns and very accurately calculate for us what is the MTF value at this precise position. So what we would do is we set this up like that, and then we would run a measurement. So the lens will spin in a circle, which is again looking at different positions on the lens, and we can see is there a big difference between like the left and the right, or the top and the bottom? And if there is, then we can use these adjustment screws that we have on this particular lens. Like every lens is a little bit different. Some have screws, some work a little bit differently, but all lenses can be adjusted in some way. So here we're using these screws, but this lens is actually in a very good condition. So you can see the line is quite even, and I won't actually change anything here. So this is the kind of setup that we decided when the signature primes were in development, that we wanted to offer a lens service that is at a much higher quality or a much higher level than is usual outside of the actual lens manufacturer. And we wanted to bring that closer to the customer. So this is a project that we introduced in, or a setup that we have introduced in several locations around the world, one being in Burbank, LA, and then in Munich, in Beijing, and also here in Hong Kong. And our other camera service centers all also include the lens projection that we saw earlier, so that we can have at least a very similar type of setup and evaluation that we can do. So that concludes the presentation portion of this ARRI Asia Hour. So if I think then we can come to our poll results and then our Q&A session. So the results for which ARRI product have you personally done maintenance for? The highest reply came to seat lighting, which was 27%, with camera coming in at 20%. Then, have you engaged ARRI service and were you satisfied? And the highest amount of answers was A, yes, and I was happy with it at 53%, which is good to see. Then, let's see, yes, but I wasn't satisfied. We have 7%, so I'm very sorry about that, and I will definitely try to do better. And actually, we also have 83% who have never needed ARRI service, so that's also a very positive result for me. Okay, then our third poll is here. Have you participated in our service trainings before? The highest number of participants said yes, and I want to join again at 60%. So I'm happy to see that a lot of you have been either here for a service training or maybe with one of our colleagues in America or possibly China or in Europe. Okay, so then we're coming to the questions. And Ading asks, for ultra-prime lens, if a lens is mounted to a lens projector and the cross image, the horizontal line, the upper side is sharp, but the bottom side is blurred, what part of element I need to rotate to align the image? Okay, so this is very specific, and unfortunately, the answer is not as simple as just saying rotate this lens or that lens. And it really also depends on which focal length. So each focal length is also quite different in the design. So I'm sorry, I cannot answer that in this general term. All right, and then Gus asks, does the service department take care of film cameras? So film cameras, we do not service film cameras in Asia. However, our Munich colleagues do still service film cameras, as well as some of our colleagues in America. All right, then, yes, has the question, do you plan any service trainings later this year? I certainly hope so. Obviously, you all know the travel restrictions and kind of contract restrictions that are in place right now make it a little bit difficult to plan, but we definitely want to do some service trainings. One topic that we're definitely looking into is the orbiter. The orbiter is still planned to be launched this year, and to go with that, we definitely also want to offer a service training for customers. Then Chris asks, how to book lens service and what is the turnaround time? So booking lens service is like any other repair or service request we get. Just send us an email at service@arri.asia and describe what the problem is. Ideally, tell us which lens you're talking about and what is the serial number, and we will have a look at that. And looking at the turnaround time, it really depends on what is needed. So we try to have most of the parts that would be required for most service on site, so we could be quite quick. However, depending on what the problem is, we may need to order parts, and that can take up to several weeks. Kathy asks, if fungus is on the lens, is it possible to service? So I'm sorry, but if you have fungus in the lens, we cannot accept the lens in for service. The reason is it's quite dangerous that the fungus could spread within the service department, and it could then grow on people's cameras or people's lenses. So it's quite difficult to keep that contained, as you may know, fungus has spores which can spread if you open up the lens. All right, then Thomas asks, do you service also non-ARRI lenses? Right now, we do not offer non-ARRI lens service. It is certainly a possibility, and certainly if you have questions, it doesn't hurt to ask if we can do it. Right now, especially in this beginning phase of offering lens service, we really want to focus on making sure our own lenses are taken care of. Ray asks, will ARRI provide on-site service? On-site service is relatively rare that we do this. If you are a DI customer, if you know what that means, so that's customers who have the ARRI scan or the ARRI laser, you will be familiar that we do offer on-site service for those devices. However, for other products, it's relatively rare, but if a certain situation really demands it, it can certainly be discussed. Then we have Chris, how to calculate the cost on lens service. So the lens service, we generally have the same labor rate as we do for camera. So, and then I'll just give you kind of a, let's see, let's say a ultra prime, if it needs a complete overhaul, for example, we would charge 8 hours for that of labor. And then depending on what kind of parts would be required, that would then come on top of that. But without knowing the exact problem, it's hard to say. So some lenses we could maybe get in and out in an hour, while others, like I said, will take 8 or even more hours to work on. So some of, especially the more modern lenses, they have quite the tight tolerance and may require quite a bit of extra time. All right, so next we have Ading. What type of grease we need for ultra-prime barrel because of sticky movement? So so when you're talking about ultra-primes, this is a grease that is developed by Zeiss, and for the focus, we're using F5 T20, I think is the name of this grease, or is the lightest grease that we have from Zeiss for the focus movement. But you can definitely send us an email and we can send you a quote for this grease. So it's definitely possible to purchase this. If you have different grease, I don't know. So I can't really suggest to buy off-brand grease. So that is the grease we're getting from the manufacturer of the Ultra Prime, which is Zeiss. Okay, so is that it? Do we have more? Is it? Okay. So we have a break in the questions. Okay, R is asking whether lens instruments can be purchased. Okay, so that really depends on what instrument you are talking about. For example, if we're talking about the lens projector, certainly that can be purchased. So the one we saw in our projection room is made by Großziel, which is also a German company, and they work quite closely with ARRI in developing this particular model. So this is a model that was made for ARRI. The main difference from their standard projector is that this one comes with or it can take our camera mounts. So any of the Alexa Mini or Amira mounts, we can mount on this projector and use. While Großziel also has their standard projector where they have their own type of mount. And then ARRI apparently is asking, is there any specific procedure for SkyPanel light engine upgrade from light engine 1 to light engine 2? I think ARRI would know this, but so right now we are not offering a specific upgrade path just in general for the SkyPanel light engine upgrades. This difference in the different generations of the SkyPanel light engines is not terribly huge, so you will not see a huge additional light output, and the cost is quite high. So we were not expecting many people to really want to. So of course we get quite a few questions, but the cost would be quite high to do this upgrade. Then we have R. How many technicians in the service center? Could you please introduce them to us? Okay, so where are all our service technicians? So right now in Hong Kong, besides me, we have 4 different service technicians. So if we can get you guys in. So we have here Giorgio. A lot of people might know him. So he's been here quite a long time. You will have worked with him with either camera or lighting equipment. Then next to him we have Tim. Tim is doing lighting, and he's also been here for several years. Actually, we don't have any very recent hires, so you might know all of our technicians here. Then we have Bryce. So Bryce has also been here. He has probably worked with you on any type of product, including CSS and cameras and lighting. And do we see Sam here? Oh, Sam is also coming in. So this is our final employee here in the service department, or technician, I should say. We do have some other help as well. So Sam is mainly doing cameras and ECS products or motors and follow focus systems like that. So yeah, so thanks everybody.
Okay.
Okay, how many technicians? And Kathy is asking, any Trinity and ARRI CSS also can service in Hong Kong? Yes, so we can also offer Trinity and CSS product service here in Hong Kong. Of course, this is a relatively new product for us, so I'm sorry if it takes us a little bit longer, but in general, we should be able to do all the service for CSS as well. And Kathy again, when can we start camera system service in Korea? Well, I don't know if we're announcing this. It's certainly coming. Hopefully this year. I'm quite positive, but we're still working on that. So I don't have any details for you yet. Marcus asks, I joined late, so sorry if this has already been answered. What do you recommend we use to disinfect ARRI products to clean off coronavirus? So I'm afraid we're not experts in chemicals or viruses, so I can't really specify outside of what is quite very well established is isopropyl alcohol in concentrations well above 60% is known to kill the coronavirus, and that is generally safe to use on most of our products. Of course, please don't use so much that it runs inside. Make sure it's mostly on the outside. And outside of that, just there are some organizations that are working on guidelines of how to work on set and how to manage gear in this time and with the concern of the coronavirus. And then Gus, let's see, have enough power consumption to repair high wattage electric ballasts. Yes, so we do have high voltage installed here to work on electronic ballasts, including the larger wattages. So actually here in this service department, we have the highest we can actually light up is the 9K. So on 9K, we can turn on the lights here, but we can also repair the 18K electronic ballasts. Of course, then we won't be able to do the testing here. We would find a location outside to make sure it works before returning it to you. Okay, then we have one more question. ARRI asks, for camera cover glass cleaning, is it possible to order the swabs from ARRI? While it is possible, I wouldn't suggest it. I think we are probably more expensive than they would be on the open market. But if you can't find them, certainly you can place an order from us. I don't know that I have the order number right now, but if you send an email to service@arri.asia, we can answer and offer that to you. Then apparently we have one more from Ading. If we buy spare controllers for SkyPanel S60C, controller programmed or not? So it really depends on what we're talking about when we're saying the controller. What are we talking about? So if we're talking about the controller board inside the SkyPanel, when you want to order that, and this is limited to people who have attended one of our lighting service trainings. So you should let us know the serial number of the fixture you want to install it in, and we will pre-program that controller for you. Okay, so no more questions, and That's it for this ARRI Asia Hour. So please follow us on Instagram at ARRI Asia. And I think that's it for today. So thanks everybody for joining, and I look forward to hearing from you, and please tune back in to the next ARRI Asia Hour. Thank you.